Happy new month to all of you, all Click Niger family and fam. We welcome you to the month of March and we hope you march forward this new month. Well, my name is Sylvia Ishewe and welcome to Youth Assembly. All right, so today we are looking at expectations from the new EFCC boss. We saw the emergence of a new chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and what are Nigerians expecting from him? Or what is Nigeria itself expecting from him? We intend to answer all of that question today on Youth Assembly. And I'm not alone. I am with Mr. Ario Dare Atoye, who is a public affairs analyst. Welcome, Mr. Ario.
Good morning, Nigerians. Happy new month.
Yeah, happy new month to you. We hope March brings good news for us all.
Yes, may God help us to march out of kidnappers, bandits, and to succeed. And have a very blissful month.
Yes. Okay. So President Muhammadu Buhari on Tuesday, the 16th of February 2021, appointed Abdul Rashid Bawa as the new chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. Abdul Rashid Bawa was confirmed as the new EFCC chairman finally on Wednesday, the 24th of February 2021 by the Senate. Mr. Bawa becomes the youngest person and the first non-officer to head the anti-graft agency since inception. How do you feel about this, Mr. Rio? When you heard of this news, for some people, there are so many people or Nigerians saying different things. Oh, well, he's too young for the job. He should do more. A lot is expected from him. But from your own perspective, what do you think about the emergence of the new EFCC boss?
Well, thank you very much. I think it's not a bad appointment. However, we would take it based on his handling of this responsibility. But let me begin by saying that EFCC has been dodged by a lot of accusations ranging from propaganda, sensationalism, lack of due diligence in prosecution of people alleged to have committed crimes or alleged to have, perpetrated corruption. But this new appointment, and which like breaking, rank with the previous mode of selection in terms of always appointing police officers. I think one thing that we are going to see that will be different in this is in terms of the administrative process of the EFCC. We expect to see thoroughness, a bit of thoroughness, in the handling of activities, handling of prosecution by Mr. Bauer. Mr. Bauer, I think, has been with the EFCC since inception, and he has an idea of the workings of the commission. He has sat or learned under several leadership and headship, and I believe that for him to have been in EFCC for more than 15 years, I think it's significant enough for him to be able, to do something differently. He must have listened to criticism of different headship of the commission. He must have listened to he must have seen the failings and the failures of the commission over the years. He must have also seen areas where the commission actually is in need of dire improvement. And so what this portends is that somebody has been given a responsibility that I think is not beyond him to handle. I also share the sentiment of those who think that probably he's too young, because the work of fighting crime, it requires a lot of experience, requires a lot of knowledge, and not just local, but also international exposure, to issue of anti-graft. Because fighting crimes with the position of Nigeria within the African region and globally supposed to be a top-notch activities, because crime is intercontinental. Especially when it comes to Nigeria, we have a lot of people perpetrating crime from within and outside, and there are a lot of networkings in terms of criminal activities going on. There are a lot of people who have partners, in Europe, in America, in Asia. So it requires a lot of experience. It requires, but I don't think that any of the past, so we are going to start from this process. I don't think any of the past EFCC boss, probably with the exception of Nuri Badu, who cut his teeth, doing a few things as a fine police officer in Lagos. I don't think any of them has the experience and the exposure of Mr. Bauer. And
When you say his experience and exposure, can you give us some instance of what he's exposed to or what his experience is for us to better understand the perspective you were talking from?
Yeah, when I say his experience and exposure, is the fact that Mr. Bauer has been around almost since inception of the commission, learning the ropes. And that's number one. Number two, he's not just only a graduate, he must have also gone through some courses, both internally and externally. That's within the commission and also probably around the country. And also, why I said that is, we didn't hear of either Lamode or was her name the woman from Benue State, Farida, either Magu.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. Better now.
Yeah, I said either Lamode, Farida, or Magu. We didn't hear of any of them doing anything specially until they were appointed, as the EFCC heads, during their own time. But here we have seen the CV of Bauer, and we have seen that Duke has been there since inception, and that's a veritable advantage for him. And like some of the things, he also rose, through the ranks, to become, I think, a zonal head in Port Harcourt. And that is significant in terms of, advancing gradually along the line. I have my criticisms, but I don't believe.
Okay, but from his age, apart from his age, and now that you raised the issue of his past bosses or his predecessors, let's see, Mr. Bauer might not perform. Some people have raised the concern that Mr. Bauer might not perform well because he's taking over from Magu, whom many Nigerians believe was removed by vested interests. Now, there are concerns that Bauer could easily be influenced by forces beyond his control. What do you think of what some Nigerians are saying?
You see, I don't want to disagree with those who have their concern, and I must explain the context. Mr. Magu was removed based on a controversial ground, and nothing has been really laid bare as to why Mr. Magu was sacked as the acting chairman of the EFCC. Mm-hmm. We do not pretend as Nigerians that we do not know that there was a Cold War and no love lost between Mr. Magu and Mr. Malami, the Attorney General of the Federation. The coming on board of Mr. Bauer was also, has been said in different quarters, that was facilitated by Mr. Malami, that's the Attorney General, that he facilitated the coming on board of Bauer, and at the same time that Bauer is from his own state. Now, the implication of that is that if Bauer is teleguided, then that means that he will only be doing the bidding of the Attorney General of the Federation. I agree that the Attorney General of the Federation should have some level of supervisory role, but this supervisory role should be institutional, not based on the personal interest of the Attorney General, which seems to be the overriding issue most times. So there should be rules and regulations clearly spelled out, such that it's institutional and which will help the EFCC boss, to not unnecessarily bow to, bow to some very counter interests or interests that are self-serving. So the problem we are facing actually is entrenching and building institutions. So most times we see people trying to bring their personal interests to override that of institutional interest and that of national interest. So the controversy between the former EFCC chairman, maybe, and the Attorney General, of course, could be attributed to something that was more than just national interest. A lot of personal, wrangling that was brought into the fray. So, uh, Mr. Bauer will do well, to prove himself by, following due process of the law, by avoiding
Okay.
sensations, and at the same time, by not necessarily allowing himself to be teleguided by the Attorney General of the Federation, and that because people are actually watching. And as a young man, a lot of young Nigerians are full of expectation that a man of 40, he should be able to do something that will make the youth very proud. We recall that when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is today assuming the headship of WTO, was a minister. The women folks were really very happy when late Dora Akunyili of the Blessed Memory was in charge of NAFDAC. The women were very proud. But at certain points, we have also seen some women in saddles. Let me not be mentioning names, and either in the oil sector, in the finance sector, who have done some very shoddy stuffs, and some women were actually a bit, worried, and people started using that some men who, or some persons started using that to try to, review women in general, which is actually I don't believe in. So also, Mr. Bauer should know that more or less that he is an ambassador of his age bracket and below, and his performance will also be used in a way to review the strength and capacity of young Nigerians. And that is always the perspective most times in our nation, that the youth have been saying, give us power, give us power, now that we've given them power. And also, I know that there are a lot of misconceptions, really, because the likes of General Muhammadu Buhari, IBB, and all of them came to power in their late 30s or early 40s. So it's nothing really has changed in terms of the fact that people of that caliber, except that the state tight syndrome of the old brigade who do not want to leave the position of leadership, saying that the young people doesn't really have the capacity, whereas they themselves got into power at a tender age. So I believe that the criticisms, Mr. Bauer must take those criticisms as genuine, no matter even some of them are done in bad faith, but he should take them as genuine simply because, look, if he must
Okay.
succeed, not allow himself to be teleguided by the Attorney General of the Federation. The Attorney General
All
of the
right.
Federation, yeah.
Okay, so Nigeria, in terms of corruption now, it's a huge tax for him going forward as the EFCC boss. But Nigeria is still ranking low on the corruption index, in spite of efforts by past administration to curb corruption. Now, what does he need to do differently now to bring or win this war against corruption?
Corruption is very difficult to fight, and at the same time very easy if you don't, allow yourself to be subdued, by some personal interests. If the president can assure him, just like former president or President Olusegun Obasanjo gave no Ribadu the access to operate, unfettered access to operate. If the current president can, assure Malambawa of his almost absolute support and assure him that he will not be teleguiding or he will not be using the Attorney General of the Federation, to stop his activities, I bet you that Mr. Bauer would definitely succeed, And like I said, it's difficult sometimes to fight crime. It's difficult for sometimes to fight criminal activities. It's difficult sometimes to fight corruption. But notwithstanding, I believe that these are something that one can do successfully if he is committed, if he can deploy all necessary, resources. And now, let me say this. One of the reasons why we have been having problem fighting corruption is simply
Mhm.
because of, lack of professionalism. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Lack of professionalism in the handling of the fight against
But we can't see your video. We can't see you.
anti-corruption.
We can hear you,
Can you
Mr.
hear me now?
Rio. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Your video went off.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let me say that one of the reasons why we've not been faring very well in the fight against corruption is the undue influence of the presidency. And I hope I can bear my mind here.
Okay, we didn't get what you said.
I say I hope I can bear my mind plainly, I can speak plainly.
You said there is challenges or something.
No, I said one of the things that is actually affecting the fight against corruption is the undue influence of the presidency, which is not limited to this administration, successive administration, and usually through the Attorney General of the Federation, and even the presidency directly, not necessarily the Buhari regime, is successive administrations. Now, the moment the EFCC chairman comes under that narrow teleguiding, then
Yes.
it becomes difficult to fight corruption, because you know why? Most of the people who are involved in this corruption belongs to one political party or the other, and a good number of them will always be in the party of the ruling elite, the ruling class. So these people are always, finding way to what you call to undermine the EFCC. For instance, let me mention something. Look at the whistle, the policy on whistleblowing introduced by the Ministry of Finance. Now, when that policy was launched, a lot of Nigerians celebrated it and commended it. But today, that same policy has been undermined, and you can hardly, see anybody today blowing any whistle. And even when they do that, because you no longer see any arrest or anything or any ministry reporting to the EFCC. I believe that this is an opportunity that Mr. Bawa must try to recreate that policy under a different framework. That EFCC must now adopt the whistle blowing policy as its own framework and do it in such a way that will help the commission to function. However, in adopting any measure that will ensure transparency, the commission chairman must show thoroughness, must avoid nepotism, must avoid tribalism, must avoid those things that are capable, of undermining the fight against corruption, sectionalism of the fight against corruption. Because a situation whereby we've seen a pattern in Nigeria, and I must say this, we know when we speak either openly on a different when we speak either openly or we converse, at interpersonal level, we often know that most, I'm not saying all, of some of these public officials elected and appointed are involved in corruption, especially some of our state governments. But when it comes to prosecution and sometimes, jailing of some of those involved, we realize that it's been limited to a few sections, not as a general fight, against corruption. And that, in a way, has emboldened some people to continue to do more, thinking that there are people who are untouchable when it comes to the issue of corruption. And these are some of the things that Mr. Bauer must address squarely if we really must succeed in the fight against corruption. He must avoid sectionalism, must avoid tribalism, must avoid protecting parochial interests. He must be able to demonstrate thoroughness. And also, look, one thing Malam Ribadu said when he was the chairman of EFCC was that, the easiest thing to trace, is money. Money is the easiest thing to trace. So, in that wise, Malam Bawa must also know that he must be thorough, watertight defense. He must learn a lot of things the way they do it in the developed world before someone is arrested, except when that person has already got wind of what was coming and was trying to tamper with investigation. But
But for this challenge you've highlighted now, how can he, as a young EFCC chairman, overcome this? It didn't start with him, but he's going to meet it. But how will he be different in this aspect? Is there an area he should just focus on, or there is more to it?
okay, this is the way I think you should do.
Okay.
You should focus on profession. I mean, you should focus on, adopting a professional method to prosecution, and also abiding by rule of law. Now,
Okay.
the EFCC chairman should first look for a few cases that cut across every part of this country. Ensure what we call watertight investigation, thorough investigation before even effecting any arrest. Now, that is the way to do it. So by the time you are coming to arrest the person, you are almost 70-80% done. And the idea of unnecessarily arresting people and keeping them in detention for 28 days, for 14 days based on administrative criminal act, justice, act, is not the way forward. Keeping them for 14 days, keeping them another 48 days, and at the end of the day, you now go to court and file some frivolous charges. You should avoid that. You should adopt clinical method of investigation. Fully investigated the person, get all the evidence together. Then the next thing is for him to go to court. In fact, sometimes he may decide not to even, go into the drama of arresting and keeping the person, behind bar. You can arrest the person in the morning, get the person's statements, and allow the person to go home administratively and come to court the following day to face charges. And that is exactly what we are looking for. Watertight, build your case. It's not based on hearsay, but evidence.
So in the past, some high-profile cases have been lost, like the case of Ojus Okalu, even Olisa Metu's case. Now, Mr. Bauer has been involved in many high-profile cases himself, but the problem is always prosecuting corruption cases successfully. So how do you think Mr. Bauer needs to do to reposition the EFCC to ensure that there is successful prosecution of these cases, especially high-profile ones?
Yeah, I know that we need justice sector reform in Nigeria, so that our judges can also be at par, with a serious-minded executive when it comes to the prosecution of corruption. However, when you look at the high-profile cases that we know, sometimes what you see is lack of thoroughness in investigation. I will give you, for instance, that of Olisa Metu, which I followed. Now, there is no way you are going to do anything to Olisa Metu without first, declaring that the proceed was actually a proceed of crime, and the person who gave Olisa Metu that money must first be found guilty. So you can't declare Olisa Metu as a guilty person without finding Sambo Dasuki, as guilty. So what Justice Aban did, was unfounded. It's a basic thing. It's something that is, for instance, nobody that collected money from Sabo Dasuki can be, nothing can be done to any one of them in terms of maybe prosecution or jailing or any one of them without first, ensuring that Sabo Dasuki himself is convicted. And all that he has done was the pursuit of, illicit financing or product of corruption. So what Aban did was to take a personal issue between him and Olisa Metu and take it to the realm of the judiciary and, decide not to listen to all the arguments by the lawyers. And so
now, when you look at this, you see that these are challenges in the system. Challenges in the system that might overwhelm him because he didn't put it there. But as he assumes office, where do you think, is this a serious concern where he needs to put his foot down and say enough is enough and changes was before? Or what advice are you going to give him in handling the pressure that comes from his office?
I think 20 years of this democracy is enough for the EFCC to have been able to master the way our politicians corruptly enrich themselves. 20 years is enough for
Mm.
EFCC to know how to even stop, what do you call it, the pursuit of crime. Probably maybe Mr. Power will do more. Will do more by probably embracing the principle of whistle blowing, whereby when the corruption is taking place in each state, the people are able to blow whistle, and EFCC will write a letter so that you don't wait till a governor finishes his 4 years or 8 years before acting, such that the moment there is whistle blowing, EFCC can elect to write the governor that we have noticed this and this and this in your administration. Can you provide, explanation to this? That we are investigating it. There is no problem. You can easily trace proceeds of crimes, how money exchange hands, if you are really serious as chairman of EFCC. What they need to do is to develop a very framework, sound framework, for unraveling, corruption, how this thieving of our money is being perpetuated. The man needs to also work with good heads. What he needs to do is also to do some kind of internal soul searching and
Okay.
also internal reforms to be able to know, are there bad eggs, within the system that will frustrate my good work? Can I get, on board some better people, some better hands who have the wherewithal to be able to help me? So, the Mr. Bauer must be ready to build a professional EFCC, not an EFCC that is driven by propaganda or sensationalism, but
Mm-hmm.
an EFCC that Nigerians will be proud of and the international community will be willing to work with when they know that this EFCC is detribalized and also is not tailored, by political interest. So, as a youth, he must be able to carve a niche for himself. And I believe that he should also make young Nigerians his constituency in terms of whistleblowing. I expect Mr. Power to address Nigerian youth and tell them that, look, this corruption that is being perpetuated in government at different levels threaten our collective future. Therefore, I want you to work together with me as whistleblowers. I want you to work with me as patriotic Nigerians for us to fight, the issue of economic crime. That wherever it is happening, please feel free, to give us this information, and we are going to go after all these proceeds sincerely. I can bet you that the youth are ready to work with Mr. Bauer. Young Nigerians are ready to work with him for us, for this nation, to succeed. And he stood a good chance. But you see, all of this depends, to the extent of his own inner capacity to be able to do what is right and to be able to ward off, the overriding executive interest, which is likely going to come from the Attorney General of the Federation. But if he's ready to work transparently, sincerely, he can
Okay.
grow on the job over time and become one of the best, crime fighters globally, not just in Nigeria. The days ahead of him is very bright if he can actually do what is right and just, and not pander to regional or sectional interests. Corruption is not a tribal warfare. Corruption cuts across. Uh, you should not be prosecuting only Orji's or Kalu, Odisametu, who have been pronounced, and we are not seeing all of this across board. We should be able to see, Nigerians should be able to have confidence in the EFCC, that the EFCC is not pandering to sectional interest. And the way and manner that these cases are prosecuted, I expect him probably maybe to also rejig his prosecution department such that the files are thoroughly, reviewed. And sometimes you take some very personal interest. Personal here means that based on his own responsibility as the chairman of EFCC to follow through on some cases that look, okay, let me identify these 10 high-profile cases that cut across, the geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And let me follow this case and tell the people prosecuting the cases, a staff, that look, I want every detail. I want you to give me briefing every court day briefing on this matter, and I want to see what you're doing. And he can as well ask Nigerians to supply with what do you call it, alternative facts, about what is actually going on. Because there are instances where there are cases in court where some officers of EFCC can decide to, connive, with the accused, and help the accused to get off the hook. Sometimes lack of diligent prosecution, does lead to, the failure of EFCC to win cases. So I expect Mr. Bauer to convene first, a sort of a summit within an internal one, to review his own internal working, and also to convene another one that is external, and call on Nigerians who can actually help him and listen to how can we renew the fight against corruption, how can we win public confidence, how can we tackle this monster, headlong. So he has all the opportunity, but I think his biggest
maximize the opportunity
is to be able, tame the influence of the executive.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Rio. I mean, if Mr. Bauer is watching you right now, he'll be so grateful for the tips you've given him as a Nigerian. Mr. Rio is a public affairs analyst, and he has given us insight on what is expected of the new EFCC boss, Abdulrasheed Bauer. What do you expect from him, Nigerians? If you're a Nigerian and you're listening to me, we'd like you to pen down your comments and tell us what you expect from the young EFCC boss, Abdulrasheed Bauer, going forward. All right, Youth Assembly is the show, and we'll make a return tomorrow for another interesting edition of Youth Assembly. My name is Sylvia Ishime, and thank you so much, Mr. Rio, for making our time to do this with us today.
Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you to the producers and everyone.
Oh, yes. Okay, my producer has been Hafsat Isa, and of course, Ioma Ukeje. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now, and have a fantastic festive March.